Hello, I'm Bethany Barber, Executive Director of the Legal Aid Society of the Orange County Bar Association. Welcome to an all-new season of the Domino Effect, in which we discuss the intersection of our community's top social issues with legal issues impacting us all. This season, we'll speak with community leaders and organizations addressing large-scale matters such as housing, labor and employment, and family law. Perpetual goodness goes a long way, and every person, company, and organization has an ability to positively impact Orange County's residents, making Central Florida a better place for all. We each have a responsibility to lend a helping hand when possible, continuing the cycle of growth and improvement in our community. It's the Domino Effect. Hello. We all know the real estate market in Central Florida is red hot. So hot that the price of residential real estate may have you seeing red. In today's episode of the Domino Effect, we're so pleased to have Ms. Amy Michaels, Tenant Services Administrator for the Orange County Office of Tenant Services, as our guest. Amy, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me, Bethany.
We are prepared to talk about all things tenants, all things rent, all things Orange County, all things Office of Tenant Services.
Okay.
So, would you tell us about your role and about how Orange County got started with the Office of Tenant Services?
So Orange County, back in 2022, started to look at the housing market, the rising rents in the housing market, and we found that we did not have affordable and attainable housing. We didn't have the stock that we needed. So we started to look at how do we bring in that affordable and attainable housing stock. In the meantime, the rising rents that were occurring in Orange County, how could we help the tenants with this issue of the rising rents? And that is how the Tenant Bill of Rights started to form. And we started to do research in how we could help tenants and landlords in Orange County get through this crisis in a manner that would benefit both sides. And so that's how the Tenant Bill of Rights started, which created the Office of Tenant Services.
So when you talk about affordable housing, do you mean housing that's commensurate with the income levels of Orange County residents and those residents who find themselves in categories other than upper class?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
All right, because I think that that's certainly the benefit of Orange County. We have this wealth of diversity, and that diversity comes in so many shapes and forms, including income levels of people. So understanding that there was this disparity that existed, can you maybe take us a little bit through the process that it took to get from this vision to actually the opening the doors?
Absolutely. That was an 8-month process. So we started the research process, and there was no other offices in state of Florida except for Miami-Dade. So I called up Miami-Dade, and we started talking of how they came about. They had just opened their doors at that point, so we were trying to take cues from them, and researched the Florida statutes, Chapter 83, and started putting all that information together, taking it back to the Board of County Commissioners for workshops, and then those workshops created more research for us to do. And we would go back and do that research and bring it back to the Board of County Commissioners for another workshop. And with our attorneys, it created that Tenant Bill of Rights, which is the majority of it is Chapter 83, but it's in terms that tenants and landlords can understand. Since there's a lot of legal jargon in those statutes that they don't understand, we simplified it for them in basically a 6-page document.
So, I've read it. It is a riveting 6 pages, and that is not just because of my profession and my background. It is because every single word in those 6 pages means something to tenants. So when I look at the Tenant Bill of Rights, I think about non-discrimination clauses. I think about information that's relevant to both tenants and landlords, about who has the right to do something and when, rights of both landlords and tenants when it comes to written notice, to renewal or non-renewal. It's all there. It's easy to access. It's available on Orange County Government's webpage. But can you back up a little bit and perhaps talk with us about how the Office of Tenant Services or Orange County Government heard from constituents? Because Orange County Government, I think everyone knows, OCG is one of the largest counties in the state of Florida. It is a large, massive, well-connected, fully functional government that takes many cues from citizens. So I imagine that you got some feedback from citizens.
We did. We got feedback from some of the activist groups, as well as citizens themselves that would come to public comment. And the number one concern that we heard is my rent has increased $200 every 2 months since I've been in that apartment or rental unit. Things such as, I can't rent because of my history, my background, my credit checks, criminal history checks that came forward, so I have nowhere to rent. And ask the county to help them. And how could we help them? And so we took that into consideration as we were going through this tenant bill of rights, but also too, we weren't against the landlord themselves. We didn't want anybody to think we were advocating for one side and not for the other. So we also met with the apartment associations, the realtors, those stakeholders to try to come to a consensus of how to make this work for all parties involved, and what the county could do to help facilitate that and make that happen.
Mm-hmm. So in that process, I take it where you started wasn't necessarily where you ended when it came to the process.
Correct.
I think you mentioned Miami was one of the counties in which had a template or had some sort of skeletal system for the Office of Tenant Services that was already in existence or the Bill of Rights. Did you pull from any other communities, any other states potentially in doing this?
Absolutely. We pulled from several different counties in Florida that had started this process or had already completed the process, as well as Washington, Boston, New York, California. We looked at all of those and what they were doing. Now, some of those had rent control laws in place, which we, did not have. And so looking at those, they were a little different, but it was still the same concept. What are the rights of a renter and what is the rights of the landlord? And so we pulled from many different areas, even Kansas. We even went to the state of Kansas.
I think it is, the process was incredibly interesting, and I think it's important for people to understand just how difficult it was, especially given the makeup of Orange County and residents. We have a very different income stream when it comes to residents. We have a wonderful gift in theme parks and a wonderful gift in tourism and travel. With it, that brings certain income levels, that brings people who require certain types of housing, sometimes short-term housing. So the need for rent in Orange County or rental properties is astronomical. It's so much larger than most places. So the sheer volume of people who are potentially impacted by this is enormous. And then when you think about overlaying that with the legislature and those laws that are on the books surrounding rights of tenants and rights of landlords, it becomes very interesting, a very interesting proposition. And then we have that largest factor for this time, for this day and age, which was COVID.
Yes.
COVID, I think, really increased the numbers of individuals who could be potentially impacted by this.
Yes.
I remember a few years ago, we had some pieces of legislation, some laws, some temporary restrictions on housing that went away, and that kind of created this rush to the courthouse, as we say, because lots of people were getting evicted. Yes. We had this moratorium on evictions that came down from the federal government that went away, and without those protections, people were being evicted left and right. I don't think Orange County necessarily placed blame on any one entity. There were just so many factors in that. I say that to say the time was certainly right for an Office of Tenant Services. Yes. In Orange County, we saw these unprecedented numbers. We were seeing people evicted in the 1,500s per month, 1,300s, which was never before. We'd never seen those numbers before. So from our perspective at the Legal Aid Society, the number of callers we had coming into the office was it was huge. And it was certainly for things beyond just, I can't pay my rent. It became questions about conditions, questions about did a landlord have the responsibility to have someone come out to the property, understanding it was COVID times, to fix something. So all of those things went into the Tenant Bill of Rights and the Office of Tenant Services, I take it.
Yes, it did. Yes.
So I'm curious, what are the plans in the future for the Office of Tenant Services for Orange County government?
Our plan for the future is to get out there and to do the outreach and the education. That's the most important piece, is to educate the residents, landlords and tenants both, of what their rights are. Don't wait till the last minute to contact our office to get referrals and information. And that's what's happening, is people are waiting until they get that eviction notice. If you know you can't pay your rent next month, you need to call us and we can get you to those resources because they're not instantaneous. They do take several weeks in some cases to go through the process. And so we're going to give you the information, the tools to help yourselves, but also don't be afraid to call us. And I think that was the big part of it, is they were afraid to call anybody because then I'm going to get evicted. I have mold. Well, no, that becomes an unlivable condition. You need to call us. We need to send somebody out to look at that. And a landlord cannot retaliate against that. It's your responsibility to maintain the unit so that it's livable. And so, our goal is to, we want people to feel comfortable, but we want to bridge that gap. Talk to your landlords. Sometimes if you talk to your landlord, they're not bad. There's no bad players in this. It's just how you approach it.
No bad players, no bad villains.
No.
And we're going to specifically talk about the approach in the next segment. We are going to take a few moments to recognize our generous sponsors. We'll be back with more of the Domino Effect right after this.
A disproportionate number of Floridians don't have access to the justice system. That's why the Florida Bar Foundation exists to bridge this gap. Their mission is to increase access for the underprivileged by funding legal services, developing innovative tools and programs, and supporting legal aid providers and the courts. Because of their efforts, they've been able to help veterans facing homelessness, children in the foster care system, men and women who survived domestic violence, and securing benefits for our elderly and disabled. Doing good for the greatest in need, because everyone deserves access to justice.
Welcome back to the Domino Effect. I have Miss Amy Michaels, Office of Tenant Services Administrator, with me, and we're going to immediately dive into the services the Office of Tenant Services provides. Amy, the big question, what exactly does the Office of Tenant Services do?
The Office of Tenant Services provides case management, information and referral, and outreach and education. We take phone calls daily, emails daily of issues that tenants or landlords may have. We respond to those with resources that they can use. If you need rental assistance, we give you that information. If you want to know where to look to rent in your price range, we have a website for that we can give you. Landlords, we are able to give you the documents. We put them right on the website. They're fillable PDF forms that they can just download them. We have FAQs. We try to cover everything, and our program manager is actually starting to go out and schedule those outreach and education functions, and that's a big part. And they're for both landlords and tenants. We're not one-sided. She provides information to landlords about, what their rights are, and she goes out into the tenants and what their responsibilities are. And so she's starting to put all that together, and she starts actually next month. So. Next week is the end of March, so beginning of April she starts, and she's got 2 a month going forward, but right now she's booked 2, 3, 4 a week.
I have an enormous grin on my face because the depth and breadth of what the Office of Tenant Services does is second to none. We talked a bit before about how you have Miami as a template. Miami-Dade, largest of the counties in the entire state of Florida, one of the largest states in the United States of America, amongst the most populated places in the entire nation, and Orange County government has an Office of Tenant Services that is serving both landlords and tenants, to my understanding.
Absolutely.
So if you are an Orange County resident, you're in any of the 13 municipalities in Orange County, you can contact the Office of Tenant Services to receive this assistance.
Absolutely. The only thing that we cannot do for the 13 municipalities is we cannot enforce their building codes. We do, however, have all that information on our website. We will give you the information to whatever jurisdiction you're in. That's why we ask for your address, so that we can ensure that you're in unincorporated, and if not, then it takes us down a different path. But we can give you that information, the contact, the websites, and say this is who you need to call. The reason that we cannot help you is because we don't have jurisdiction over that. But anybody in Orange County, for information and referrals, yes, we can give you all of that. We just cannot enforce building codes for the cities.
So can we tackle a bit more specifically what the Office of Tenant Services does for the two most obvious people who could potentially, profile of people who could potentially call tenants, landlords? So if you're a tenant, it stands to reason that you would contact the Office of Tenant Services if you think that your landlord is inappropriately enforcing something, for instance, rent. If they are making you pay more than you should, or changing your rent, even though you have a contract. But it sounds like you do much more than that for tenants.
Yes, we do the explanation. There's two different types of leases. You have your month-to-month, quarterly, and you have your long-term lease. Usually anything over 7 months is a long-term lease to us. If you have a long-term lease, it's whatever is in that lease. So notice requirements, it's whatever you signed in that lease for the 60-day notice. The 60-day notice really focuses on those month-to-month and quarterly. That's where you see the most issue of the raising of rents, not letting them know, just doing it, when they felt like it. And what that rental notice ordinance did is it says you have to give them 60 days notice if you are going to raise their rent more than 5%.
And that is really huge, especially when you think that statutorily it's kind of a no man's land when it comes to that. So we're talking about, generally when we're talking about quarterlies and month-to-month tenants, there isn't something in writing.
Correct.
That's the issue, is that there's not something in writing.
Correct.
So this ability to provide written notice is huge for both sides. I think people don't understand that. There are certain protections the landlord receives as well as tenants receive in that. So your office is making sure that the enforcement of that takes place, and even knowledge of those rules takes place.
Absolutely. And if the landlord does not know, for whatever reason, they don't know that they have to provide that 60 days notice. We're not out there to just all of a sudden issue you a citation, and fine you for that. We give you the opportunity to correct that and explain to you what that notice ordinance is and how you need to adhere to it. So we do give you the opportunity to correct that, and then from then on out, make sure you're giving them the 60 days notice for rent increases of over 5%. Or if you're not going to renew their lease. If you're not going to renew their lease, give them 60 days notice so that they can go and find other housing. It's not easy to find housing with a week's notice or 2 weeks notice. However, they can call our office or give them that website. It is actually a really great website I got from Housing and Community Development. And you can type in a zip code, Orlando, Maitland, wherever, and it will pull up by rent amounts. Like you can put in parameters and say, I can only afford A to B. You put that in, it's going to pull up all those rents that are within your price range. And so we've been giving that out a lot, actually, for people that are looking for new housing for themselves. And we put it right on our website, so you can access it 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And that was through Housing and Community Development gave us that one. So
that is powerful. That's
Yes.
a powerful tool. So speaking of powerful tool, landlords can get so much out of this too. If I'm a landlord, what do I want to contact the Office of Tenant Services for?
The one biggest call that we have gotten is, I can only evict people that don't pay their rent, and that's not the case. If a tenant is destroying your property, if they're causing, issues, the noise issues, in that you do have the right under Florida law to do an eviction. It's not just for non-payment of rent. And so we found that a lot thought, well, I have to put up with this until the lease is over with, and that's not the case. Everybody has the right to enjoy, peace and quiet in their unit. And so a lot of questions on that. A lot of questions on how long do I have to fix an issue, a building condition. If it's a burner went out on a stove, no, I don't expect it 24 hours, there's some time there. But if their air conditioning went out, the toilet's backed up, those are items that you need to get to them immediately. Mm-hmm. And then the last thing that I've heard recently from landlords is that they can access their property anytime they want. And that answer is no, you cannot. You do have to give 24 hours notice. There are laws on the books due to the tragedy that happened over by UCF where the young lady was killed by the maintenance person. And so they have to give 24 hours notice. They cannot just walk in unless it's an emergency. And an emergency constitutes the water pipe busted and is flooding out the unit. It's on, there's a fire there. Those type of things that, we're not going to wait 24 hours to go in. But if it's for general maintenance or to go in and you have a clause in your lease that you do some type of inspection every so often, you need to give them 24 hours notice. You cannot just walk in on them.
And I'm excited in the next segment, we're going to talk more about the intersect of the Office of Tenant Services and the law, a bit more about the Office of Tenant Services itself. When is it open and how do people contact the office?
We opened on March 1st of this year. And honestly, I'm going to tell you that office was put together in 28 days from the time that the ordinance was adopted on January 24th to March 1st. That office was put together, staffed. And that was not an easy feat, but we did it. And so they can contact us. Our number is easy to remember. It's 407-836-RENT. We also have a website. It's ocfl.net/tenant services. And we have a dedicated email, and it's tenantservices@ocfl.net. And if it's business hours, we respond within one business day. So if you email us, you're not going to wait 2 weeks for somebody to respond to you. We're going to get back to you within 24 hours. And when you contact us, we may need additional information from you. So you are required to provide us documentation on whatever the complaint is so they can be investigated, and it's not one-sided. We need to investigate to make sure there actually is a valid complaint.
So we are going to talk in a bit specifically about how those complaints are handled as well as some other goodies. But right now, we have another break before we begin our final topic, which is the legal element of the Office of Tenant Services. We'll be back shortly.
A disproportionate number of Floridians don't have access to the justice system. That's why the Florida Bar Foundation exists to bridge this gap. Their mission is to increase access for the underprivileged by funding legal services, developing innovative tools and programs, and supporting legal aid providers and the courts. Because of their efforts, they've been able to help veterans facing homelessness, children in the foster care system, men and women who've survived domestic violence, and securing benefits for our elderly and disabled, doing good for the greatest in need because everyone deserves access to justice.
Welcome back. If you've ever lived in a rental property, you know tenants and landlords don't always see eye to eye on many of the elements of rent, including the condition of a rental property, rental payments, and lease renewals. I'm joined with the Office of Tenant Services Administrator, Ms. Amy Michaels, and we're going to now discuss how the Office of Tenant Services works in conjunction with legal entities to assist tenants, namely through their partnership with the Legal Aid Society. But before we go specifically into that association of the law and the Office of Tenant Services, let's talk a little bit more about what the Office of Tenant Services is able to do based on the staffers you have there. I hear the staffers have some very specific skill sets.
Yes, they do. We have 3 staff. We have a program manager and 2 assistants. And my program manager actually speaks French Creole. My one assistant speaks Spanish and my other assistant speaks Portuguese. So we've hit all 4 languages that are prevalent in Orange County. It does not mean that if anybody calls our office and speaks a language that's not one of those 4, and then in that case we will find a translator. We will still assist you. It'll just take us a little bit of time to find a translator to translate what the issues are to us. But anybody is welcome to call regardless of their language barrier.
You did your homework before you opened this office. You were
Yes.
you were making sure that you were meeting the needs of every resident
Yes.
in the county. So with meeting those needs comes partnerships, because it sounds like you have an understanding that the issue of that tenants face maybe goes beyond what the office does, even though the office does several dozens of things. So can you talk about those partners that you have, those partnerships out there?
Absolutely. We are partnered with our 311. So anybody who calls 311 and they have any issues that relate to our office, they are directed to us. We partner with Heart of Florida United Way through their 211. So they have on their website what our office does, what our information, our website, they have that up there. And then we're starting to go out there with other partners. So Homeless Services Network we have meetings with, and we want to partner with Coalition for the Homeless, Harbor House, because domestic violence, if somebody were to call us, they are in that situation, we would have that information available to them. So we want to partner with the nonprofits out there that can provide services beyond what the county itself can provide. We also partner with our own departments and divisions within the county. So Community and Family Services, that is where your rental assistance, your mental health assistance, that is housed over there. Any type of discrimination claims, we would send those to our Housing and Community Development. They do those investigations there through the Fair Housing Act. And then any building condition violations, we go through code enforcement, so we will refer them over there. They can contact us. We can send it through email over to those divisions so that they get that information from us. But we also want the tenant to call also, so that it's on record of who they are, and that we have that on record in case it goes any further down the line in a court case, or they have that documentation that they contacted us and that they're in our system.
It is very natural that people can see the Office of Tenant Services as a one-stop shop. There is so much going on there, and it is so much based on everything that the community needs. Are there things that you want the community to know that the Office of Tenant Services does not handle?
Yes, we do not provide monetary assistance. So our office does not go through any type of process or procedure to provide you rental assistance. We refer you out for that issue. We do not provide legal advice. That's what we partner with Legal Aid Society. We do not provide legal advice. We do not modify your leases. So those are things that we do not do. We can't do that. And so, yes, you could call us a clearinghouse, but we have the actual agencies that we partner with, and we know what those services are, so we can get you to the right service when you call us. Sometimes that doesn't always happen with other like 311, and it's because we ask you questions to make sure, and you may have more than one issue. It's, we find you may call us for rental assistance, but you have several issues that we can go ahead and refer you to several different agencies to try to give you the full help that you need, not just a piece of it.
So it is not necessary for people to have the expectation that they're only going to receive assistance with one thing.
Correct.
Through the referral process,
Correct.
You're going to address the whole person as they
Correct.
come. So let's talk about one of those partnerships, the Legal Aid Society,
Yes.
which is my organization, and what the intersect of the Office of Tenant Services and the law is. From our perspective at the Legal Aid Society, we have a very robust housing defense practice. From our perspective, we are serving tenants who are facing issues with their rent, they're facing eviction, untenable living conditions, and several things in between. What do you see from the people who contact the Office of Tenant Services? What types of legal assistance are they looking for?
Mostly for us, the legal assistance is the evictions. And so if you do call us with an eviction and it's valid, we ask you for the documentation. What we do is we put that in our system because we actually purchase the same software that you guys use at Legal Aid, so we can seamlessly transfer it over to you all. But the biggest part is to make sure we get all that information for legal aid. It's a valid case before we transfer it over. We don't want to send over to your office things that aren't valid. So we try to do the investigation to make sure it's valid to our standard of okay, and then send it over to you guys to take over, to give the legal advice, and to be able to help that tenant if they do need to go to court.
I think that's something that's really worth emphasizing, just how much detail went into making the Office of Tenant Services. I think most people know that when you're talking about a housing case, particularly an eviction defense case, time is of the essence. We're talking about 3 days, 7 days. The time frames are so short, they're so succinct, and the implications of missing those time frames mean eviction. It means the difference between having a place to lay your head at night and having your children who don't have any stability when it comes to housing. So that system that you talked with, that referral system, enables you to see people who could potentially be available or be eligible for legal services and send that information over in the same day.
Correct.
Same minute, same hour. That case can be selected and picked up, and it's generally minutes. We are automatically alerted when that case comes through, and we can begin working on it immediately. We can begin assessing the needs and contacting the potential client. So those issues of eviction defense are certainly out there. And then we have some other ones too, particularly because of COVID, particularly because of the environment we find ourselves in Central Florida. We are such a desirable place to live. I think it's unfortunate and real that we have more people looking for reasonable rentals than we have available space. So with that doesn't just come the evictions. It comes untenable living conditions with people contacting us because maybe they don't have a working stove, maybe they don't have a working toilet, there's no refrigerator even though the lease said they have one. Are you seeing those issues as well?
Yes, we are seeing, what I'm seeing the most of right now is mold, where people are sending the videos through the email of, some of them are quite horrible situations. And so immediately we tell you, call 311, contact code enforcement. And then in the meantime, we're taking your information and we're sending that over to code enforcement too. So we want you to call code enforcement, but we're also sending that over. In cases like that, I actually go back after 10 days. I will go back to those cases and I will call that tenant and I'll ask them, where are we at in this situation? Has somebody come out to investigate this? Did you make the call? Sometimes they don't make the call, but we go back. We don't just send you out and away. I will actually come back and call you and ask you where are you at? How did it go? Did you call these agencies? Okay, if they couldn't help you, well, let me give you some more. Because the caveat is that I can't guarantee those agencies can help you or give service because they're based off funding just like everybody else. So if their funding runs out and they may not be able to assist you, I'm going to call you and find that out, and then I'm going to give you some more resources. So we're going to see you through till the end.
That's the amazing thing that really does make the difference. It's the guidance. It's not hand-holding, it's not forcing people to do things, it's making sure that everyone has access to the information they need to make the decisions that are right for themselves and right for their families. The law is complicated. The economy is complicated. There are so many complicated parts about living in the world these days. But the fact that there is an office that can walk you through A to Z of housing, rents, affordable rents, how do you navigate the very complicated legal process? Is there an entity that's going to take you to trial if that's what needs to happen and be there to support you and provide legal services is really everything. So we're just so fortunate and so thankful that the Office of Tenant Services, through your leadership and guidance, is up and running. It's a gift. It really is a gift, and I'm so proud to live in a community that has it.
Well, thank you. And I'm proud to have you as a partner in this journey that we've taken. And there's so much further to go in this journey. So
we'll see where we go next.
We'll see where we go next.
It was a pleasure, of course, speaking with Amy Michaels at the Office of Tenant Services. We appreciate her support of the Legal Aid Society and Orange County community in general. Thank you for joining us for this episode of The Domino Effect. We'll see you again. The Legal Aid Society has existed for over 60 years, providing legal representation to clients on issues similar to those discussed in today's episode. It is imperative that the community knows when faced with legal troubles, you are and should still be able to receive high-quality legal representation and access to justice regardless of your income. If you rent a residence in Orange County and have questions about local housing regulations, you may contact the Orange County Office of Tenant Services by calling 407-836-RENT or 407-836-7368. If you are seeking assistance on a legal matter, especially a rental defense issue, you may contact the Legal Aid Society law firm by calling 407-841-8310. The Legal Aid Society is a nonprofit law firm that relies greatly upon volunteerism and donations. For more information on how you can help the organization keep its doors open, visit www.legalaidocva.org. Thank you for tuning into this episode of The Domino Effect. And remember, perpetual goodness goes a long way. We'll see you next time.